Okay, let me step in here and see if I can take a swing at this and tell me how off you think I am. Now, I see this, and instantaneously my mind goes into first century food customs. That's how, I mean, instantaneously that's where I go. And I think that the word koinos, exactly what Rob is talking about here, I think is central to our understanding of this. In the first century, you have this debate going on. I believe we have this debate going on among believers on what is koinos. In other words, what's going to make us unclean? Now, this can be ritually unclean, but there's a larger debate on what is koinos. And Rob's exactly right. There's this category that's being, people are attempting to put this category on. So he says, as for the one who is weak in faith, welcome him, but do not quarrel over opinions. One person believes he may eat anything, while the weak person eats only vegetables. This, to me, sounds off the idea of meat in the meat markets. I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again. If you had meat in the first century on your table, unless you'd gotten it from the meat market, if you have a piece of meat on the table, it's because it is some form of a ritual. It is some form of worship to a god. It is, and we could see this in Jewish context. We could see this in pagan context. But the point is that if you have meat on the table, it's a form of worship. It has been offered to a god. What they would do is the butcher / sacrificer would take this meat, he'd butcher it up, he'd give the pieces to the table as they wanted it. Anything that was left over, he'd take to the meat market. And this is another way of getting paid, right? He'd be able to take the leftover meat to the meat market. He would sell it in the meat market. Anything that was in the meat market had been offered to a pagan god. And so the question that is going on, I believe, the debate that's going on in some realms of this is whether or not believers are allowed to eat it. And so am I allowed to eat a piece of meat, a piece of beef that has been offered to a pagan god? And Paul has a whole discussion about this in Corinthians, whether or not you're allowed to eat. Are you allowed to partake of the table of demons and the table of the Lord? And this does not mean are you allowed to eat meat that has been offered to idols. Rather, what Paul comes to is the opinion that if you're going to eat something, you just cannot participate in the worship of a false god. If it's been if it's been offered to a false god, who cares? That's not a real god. That's a demon. We don't care about those false gods. I can buy meat from the market and I can eat it, and I'm not worshiping the false god. This is Paul's conclusion. And so when we come here to Romans 14:2, I think that this is the debate, and I could be wrong, but I think that this is the debate that's still going on in Paul's head. One person believes he may eat anything, while a weak person eats only vegetables. In other words, he's going to sustain from eating meat. How far off do you think I am so far, Rob?
No, I think that's true. The contrast is eat anything versus eat vegetables. Anything doesn't mean lobster and spiders and bats and
right.
bunny rabbits. That's not what that person believes. What it means, the contrast is different attitudes towards available meat. Keep going. I think you're in good. Well, we should point out that the Torah itself, we learn that there is slaughter that is acceptable, that's not worship, right? I mean,
right.
But the blood had to be poured out, right? And then, but if you're in Jerusalem and you want to do a sacrifice, you have to go to the centralization of worship at the temple is a core point for Israel in the land. But farmers, if you were a shepherd way up in Galilee, you could be a supplier of lamb to local people, and they could slaughter that lamb. They could have shish kebabs or whatever, and they wouldn't be seeing it as worship. They would have meat. But in the Greco-Roman world, we do need to recognize. Now, you're coming across saying all meat in the marketplace was. Maybe it was. Maybe a huge, the lion's share of it was. But in either case,
so
I
have
think
receipts
you're totally
on that, by the way,
to bring this meal context.
Yeah, I have receipts on that, by the way. That's not just something I've made up. And actually, what I was looking for is I have two books that are around here somewhere, and I can pull out specific receipts. Maybe next week I'll have those books on hand, so I can tell people exactly where I'm getting that information from. Thank you so much for watching this video. Tell us your thoughts on this subject by leaving a comment in the comment section. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, and enable those notifications. And we'll see you in the next video.